only 7 or 8 people in the whole movie. So Ridley had said to me one day, he said, I'm going to cast every other role with the most brilliant actor I can that doesn't need help from me, because I'm going to concentrate on the visual style.
We had wanted not to use a classic star for the film.
When you see, and talk, and people read and read and read, and there's always one that suddenly goes bang, that's the one.
Ridley Scott had asked me to cast his first film, which was The Duelists, and we'd worked together really well, and it was very enjoyable. So totally different from Aliens. It was Napoleonic Wars, full of character actors.
First of all, I felt I wanted to see every actor in the United States in the directory. Okay, so I think we did see every actor in the United States, in Los Angeles and New York.
It was about as far removed as you could get from his first film, because the script was very, very linear. It was very few stage directions. You could not tell who was a man and who was a woman. I sensed deliberately.
We wrote it to be all men. So I'm getting everybody their due. There's a lot of people that had to make some good guesses here. I think maybe that's the only way most of the really great movies get made. But there's somebody in each spot that's doing something amazing, and you don't think of it, and wow, it's part of what makes it magic.
David Giler and Walter, who sort of took over the writing from Ron and from Dan, I think they came up, I'm not sure whether it was David or not, idea of sort of to try and break the mold of making Ripley a woman, and of kind of making it more, I mean, the truck drivers in space analogy I think is a pretty good one, and that appealed to Ridley because, the thing that didn't appeal to him as an art director was sort of, shiny Flash Gordon surfaces and things like that. He wanted the thing to be just like a battered old truck where there was bits of tape over cracks in the chairs they sat in and things like that.
And we realized that studios might resist it. Even though we went to Corman first, we thought that Fox might not make the movie unless we managed to make it as commercial as possible. So we had a little asterisk. Please note, any one of the crew members, or let's say 2, could be females if you want to have it go for a wider, broader appeal. But to all truth, we did not in any way remotely conceive the idea that the lead, Ripley, would be a woman.
We were looking it over, and Walter and I sort of thought, here's this one character, not too interesting, and we thought, this studio, this was made, I hate to say this, but for very cynical reasons, this studio is making Julia and Turning Point, and they really believe in the return of the woman's movie. But we get a lot of points, if we turn this character into a woman, and it'll just make the character more interesting.
She wasn't originally in the original script. Originally, the protagonist was a male.
So Laddie said was one day, can Ripley be a woman? And we looked at each other, we said, yeah, but it seems kind of funny. I mean, they've never done that, a woman in a space horror movie as the leading character. And he said, well, I have a feeling that's going to make it unique.
And we started going through lists of actresses and who was right for the role. You have to remember that Sigourney Weaver in those days was not a big star, and she tested for the part.
I got this audition. They'd sent me the script, which, of course, not knowing the Ramboldi designs, I pictured this big yellow blob of gelatin chasing these people, and nothing as elegant as what it turned out to be. And I actually went to the wrong place. And I called my agent and I said, it was like Friday afternoon. I said, I don't know, the script was... She said, just go.
I'd met Sigourney on the last go in New York. She'd come recommended because of a play that she'd been doing on Broadway. She was known as a real comer on Broadway, right? And I didn't see the play, I just met her.
As I remember, we were in the Regency Hotel at the time. Sigourney, for some reason, had gone to another hotel. We did not know this. And she was due at, 2:30, and 2:30 arrives, and 2:45 arrives. 10 minutes to 3 arrives, and then we hear, I can't say running feet in the corridor, but we hear
fast-paced feet coming toward the door and then slowing down and composing itself. And the bell rings and Mary opens the door, and Ripley was standing there. This extraordinary-looking woman, tall, commanding presence.
And I was wearing these very high hooker boots, and I looked about 7 feet tall.
In a very nerve-wracking situation, projecting composure, but you knew that just an eighth of an inch behind that composure was a very nervous actress, a very tense actress. And that was exactly right for what we knew, David and I knew immediately.
And I was very impressed by her, you know, height, and she's a very impressive character, very intelligent, and seemed to make sense to me. So I expressed this to Laddie, who said, yeah, but you got a test. And I said, but I'm 3 weeks from principal photography.
And we got to do what was basically a run-through of the movie with the real kind of set. And, you know, I was afraid it would be like me and a potted palm, you know, and I'd have to go. But he gave me this whole run-through, which as an actor I really appreciated.
Sigourney was the last one to get cast. The sets, the test I shot in were the sets I was building. That was the Nostromo. We didn't rattle that together. I was actually building, so it was scary.
What I didn't like about it that much was my performance, because I think I was trying to be tough instead of just... What I discovered in the course of this, which was my first film basically, was you don't try to... You just play each scene for what it is instead of trying to work on an arc. The people aren't consistent. They would be different in a love scene than they would be as they're fighting an alien.
They screen tested many people, but she was dynamite. You saw it right there in the screen test, as you saw later in the movie. This was her very first film. It's all behind the eyes.
My intuition, always in casting, is from the second they walk through the door. When I see somebody walk through that door, I knew somehow this was her.
Then there was the second woman, Lambert, but it was a difficult one to finally arrive at Veronica Cartwright. I can't remember the film she'd been in before, but she played a way out, weird sort of character. And she had a particular intensity and unconventional looks, which made her very, very right for it.
I went on an interview in Los Angeles, and I met with the casting people there. Originally, I had read for Ripley, and I was called back, and I read again for Ripley with Ridley there. Then I was due to go over to England. So I had gone over for vacation. So I talked to my agent before I left, and I said, are they still casting for Alien? I mean, I might as well go see them again, or at least let them know that I'm here. So I went in again, and I read again while I was there. And then I found out, I come home, but I find out I get it. So I go over thinking I'm doing the part of Ripley. Nobody bothered told me that I was doing the part of Lambert until they called to do wardrobe. And they said, well, you need to come in and to get your gear and stuff for Lambert. And I said, oh, I'm not playing Lambert, I'm playing Ripley. Oh, no, that part's been cast. So I said, well, wait a minute. I haven't even read this script from another perspective. So here I am in England. I call back my agent. I said, aren't I doing Ripley? And he said, yes. And I said, well, they said that I'm doing Lambert. So I said, well, I'm going to have to reread the script and see. So I reread it, and it bothered me a lot that she was so weepy all the time. I mean, every time she seemed to, but they convinced me that I was the audience's fears. I was reflection of what the audience is feeling.
What you wanted to avoid all the way through was these people looking like just ordinary, bland, nice, middle-of-the-road, middle-class people. That would not have... They had to be vivid. You know, you were stuck with them in this capsule, or whatever you want to call it, for a long time, and they had to be vivid and very clearly defined.
When I read Alien initially, I wasn't drawn to the project. Ridley wasn't attached. It was, my understanding was going to be a $2 or $3 million budget on it. And I thought, well, you're not going to make an effective film for that. And, you know, it's a nice piece of material, it has potential, but you're not giving it that potential. And that, I thought, was that. And about a month later, I got a call from England, from one of the producers at the time, and told me that Ridley was going to be directing it and that there was a budget that would realize the potential. And then it became something else. It became working with Ridley Scott and learning about filmmaking.
What Ridley's vision, as far as the actors were concerned, was he wanted it very much to be not of any time or any world. So it was important there was a mixture of nationalities. I cannot remember if Yaphet Kotto's character was written as such, but he was obviously perfect for that part because he's so vivid, a wonderful actor.
When I first met Ridley, first meeting we had, I said, I don't like science fiction films or monster pictures. I opened with that, which was obviously a good opening. And he said, well, actually, I don't either, but I think I can make something of this one.
The casting of John Hurt, I think it is known that there was another actor originally playing that part, John Finch, who became ill, and we had to recast.
Probably identified that moment very strongly by playing Macbeth for Polanski. I'd been impressed by Polanski's work anyway, but particularly also by Finch. And so he said, yeah, sure, I'd love to do this. He came on board. First day, first shot, he starts to look as yellow as this pencil. And I thought, God, what's wrong? And we did a couple of takes, and he seemed to absolute lackluster, no energy. He's sagging in his seat, and we cut. And I got up and went over to him and said, what's up, you all right? He said, no, I'm terrible. I said, I feel terrible. He said, how do I look? I said, terrible. And we had to lift him out of his seat, and he was carried away. And it turns out that he was a diabetic.
I had been asked if I'd like to do Alien, but I had already committed to the South African film, so that was dropped. And the actor that was going to play Kane later, for one reason or another, had to drop out.
That night, we had a quick regroup in the office, and that night I drove to Hampstead Village and met with John Hurt.
And then they heard that I was then free, so Ridley Scott came to me and we talked till gone midnight, say on the Monday.
Prepared him, of course, for what it was, and he said, so when do I start? And I said, tomorrow morning.
And on the Tuesday morning, I was on the set at 7:30. So it was not a usual film for me. The script didn't arrive, and I didn't mull it over, and I didn't decide this, that, and the other. I had a long pitch from Ridley, and a very interesting one, too. And by the end of it, I said, okay, Ridley, you better send the car around now to take me out to the studio.
I think life and acting and everything is so full of those things. What if it hadn't happened? Like, nobody knows. I think John Hurt would probably still have exactly the same career because he's done so much varied and wonderful work. That really brings us to Ian Holm, who I think is the most wonderful actor and hadn't done anything like that at all before. And Ridley was really thrilled that he wanted to do it. And in those days, he'd done very little film. He'd done a bit of television, but he was really very much a theatre star.
Casting was extensive, and even though it's only for 7 people, at the end of the day, I think it's a pretty definitive cast.
The casting is enormously important to the whole making of the film, to the director's concept of the film, because it does so much work for the director, just innately in who you cast. It gives the director so much to work with, or not, if it's not properly cast. So it is an extraordinarily sort of subtle skill that's difficult to explain, but people who know about filmmaking understand it, and audiences who don't know about it appreciate it without always understanding what they're appreciating.